Welcome to episode 2 of MMA Bros. Your hosts Scott and Bill are here to break down all the action of UFC 297. Let's get stuck into it. Hey bro.
Hey bro, how are you?
Good. We just watched some fights this afternoon. Interesting results.
It was a good card.
Was it?
I thought so. I was impressed.
Look, I thought there were some good fights. Some other fights wasn't overly impressed with, but I guess that's the nature of a fight card, isn't it? When you got a lot of fights, you're gonna get some good ones and some bad ones.
Yeah, yep.
Let's start with the main events. How did that go with your expectations? And what did you think of the result? How did you score it?
So I had it slightly differently. I had scored it 4-1 Strickland, possibly 3-2 Strickland. It came down to the second round for me. I had scored that towards Strickland, but I know a lot of people had that one for Duplessis. But it was a close fight. What's that?
Like the judges.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look, I thought, at the start of the fight, Strickland was, controlling distance with his jab. He wasn't coming forward in his usual aggressive style, which sort of I found a little bit strange. I think we talked in the pre-fight that he tends to walk his opponents down and just, overwhelms them. That was
Yeah, and I said prior to the fights, obviously on the pre-fight, that I thought that perhaps Duplessis' wrestling might be a factor. I asked you if you thought it would be, and it wasn't a factor in the sense that I don't think it really made or broke the game plan, or sorry, the fight. It wasn't that consequential, but I wonder if perhaps one of the reasons that Strickland wasn't as keen to come forward is because he did have to worry about that takedown.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think after the takedown occurred, at least the first couple, I think suddenly Strickland was a little bit less willing to fully commit to some of those jabs,
Hmm.
which sort of took a little bit of the sting out of them. And DDP was a little bit more, I guess, I mean, he threw a lot of swings and misses, right? But and I think the other thing too, with regards to the judging as well, is the commentators were talking a lot about the leg kicks getting checked,
Hmm.
and I'm not sure the judges are overly expert at telling when things are getting checked. And
It's interesting that you bring that up because I completely agree. I was thinking about that during the fight. The commentators, obviously they're fighters. They're also experts, analysts, right? So they can see those kicks and see how effective Sean Strickland was at checking them. But to the judges, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if they really understand the difference. And I mean, you could see in Sean Strickland that there wasn't sort of any change in terms of he wasn't wobbly on that leg. He didn't appear to change stances at any point because it was bothering him. He was just checking those kicks. So, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how the judges would have seen that.
he certainly also didn't seem to fight with the same usual fighting style. Like he didn't see Philly Shell in the same sort of presenting the same sort of way that he did with Izzy. Did you notice that, or was it not?
I didn't notice too much of a difference in his style other than he was less going forward. But I think that he had adjusted his style since the Pereira fight to be a little bit less forward pressure. Um, but maybe not. Maybe it was the wrestling of Duplessis. Maybe it was the fact that Duplessis was also throwing some pretty hard shots back.
Mm, he definitely seemed like Strickland certainly seemed like he was trying to fight a lot more technical than his previous fights. And I wonder how much having Pereira as a training partner in his corner, influenced that.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. How did you have it scored?
I had to score 3-2 to DDP. Um, I thought he lost the first. I thought the first was pretty decisive to Strickland. I don't think anyone really could debate that. Sort of had the volume with the jabs. Round 2 was close, but I gave it to DDP as I did round 3 and round 4. And then I thought Strickland edged it in the fifth. So I had a 3-2. Um, and but it was pretty close. I wouldn't have thought it was a robbery if it had gone 3-2 the other way. Um, so that's how I had it scored. One thing I didn't like in the fight was Dracus's open hand. I was surprised it wasn't eye poke. I'm not sure if you noticed that, but he was really pouring. He had his hands wide open, and it just looked like it was an eye poking that offering there to happen. But
I
never.
I didn't pick up on that at all. I have to be honest. But yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. So I just to go through what I had Strickland winning the first round, so we're in agreement there. Round two was the one. I gave that to Strickland. I mean, at the end of that round was when Duplessis' eye was really swollen up, and I thought, on account of the strikes landed and the damage done, uh, but it was a close fight. Um, Third, I had again also a close round. I gave it to Strickland again because of damage. I saw there was a bit more damage on Duplessis' face at the end of that round. Round four, I thought was pretty clearly Duplessis. He opened up two cuts on Strickland, did a couple of takedowns. That was pretty clear cut. And then the last round to Strickland. So yeah, but it was a close fight though. It wasn't a really it wasn't a shutout by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it wasn't. And in terms of the stats, and I know you're not a big fan of the stats, but Strickland did outstrike him 173 of 408 significant strikes to Dracus's 137 of 354. And the other
So what were those numbers? The high level landed numbers?
173 to 137.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
big
Okay.
discrepancy in that was in the first and the fifth rounds,
Yeah. Right.
which I think we both had for Strickland.
Yes.
Then second, third, and fourth were much closer. Although Dracus did have 6 takedowns in the fight with that
Yeah. Right.
minutes and 8 seconds of control time.
Yeah, he did land a number of takedowns, and as you said, the control time there's quite low because he was really unable to sort of do too much with it. He didn't really land much with it. He got a little bit of control, and then often Strickland was back to his feet. So you were right in your analysis before the fights about Strickland being obviously quite a good wrestler and not having to worry about the takedown. He was able to get himself out of those scenarios, but I think it probably did affect his fighting style to a degree.
Yeah, definitely. I think Strickland might, upon reflection, rue the fact that maybe he wasn't a bit more aggressive. Um, yeah, I think, as I said, as the fight wore on, he sort of got a little bit too reserved. In the last round, yeah, he put it on a bit, but as I had it scored 3-1 leading into that fifth round, probably needed to finish, as two of the judges would have agreed with me.
Yep. And yeah, I think the takeaways though for me from the fight were one, Duplessis really did prove that he's got a gas tank that can last 5 rounds. His output was solid across the 5 rounds, and he didn't look like he gassed. Um, uh, Sean Strickland, his takedown defense is obviously well regarded now, for me anyway, and DDP, I don't know, he's the real deal. He's yeah, it's gonna be interesting for what's next for him.
I think what's next for him is probably going to be Israel. I think
Yeah,
that fight can happen, and I think that it's interesting because it would have been ideal to have that fight in Africa.
Duplessis versus
Yeah,
Israel. Yeah,
yeah, but they still might do that. Obviously Israel's from that part of the world. DDP, obviously the UFC always likes to take shows to new regions and build. Every time they go to a new area, they seem to build fighters, and that's what they did when they started coming to Australia. Look at us now; we've got a lot of UFC high quality fighters. They obviously got that when they went to the UK as well. So I think that's what they'd like to do. Probably not ideal given like the timing. Doing this, a year ago when Usman and Ngannou were champions. Could have had a mega card over there, but yeah. Also, what do you think's up next for DDP?
Well, if Israel's coming back, which he signaled that he likely is, and I'm assuming that he's going to come back at middleweight, then that would make sense.
What do you think about Strickland? I wouldn't mind seeing Strickland, assuming Rob gets past his next opponent.
Paulo Costa.
All Costa, yeah. So that fight was supposed to take place in Perth, and Costa pulled out. Um, and so assuming Rob gets past Costa, I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Strickland.
That's a pretty big assumption. Costa's, he's not going to be easy, and Rob's not had the most success towards this end of his career. So
I don't think Costa's been the same fighter since he got touched up by Israel. Yeah, he had that whole fiasco about drinking wine the night before the fight, and as I said, he's pulled out of multiple fights since then. Already pulled out of a fight with Rob. I don't know. I don't know. And then he missed weight considerably against, was it Vittori? Not Vittori? I don't know.
yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, weight division above. So, yeah, something doesn't seem to be quite right with him at the moment.
Well, time will tell.
All right. The co-main event. What were your thoughts on how that played out? Pennington and Silva.
Yes, it didn't go the way that I thought it might. Pennington showed her toughness throughout that fight, particularly early on. I had that one scored 4-1 Pennington to Costa. Sorry, to Bueno Silva, I should say. I only had Silva winning the first round, so she came out strong, Silva, and she looked good in that first round. But after that, Pennington took it to her.
Yeah, much the same. I mean, I was surprised at how quickly Silva gassed out. By the end of the second round, you could pretty much tell where the fight was going to be going. It was one-way traffic. What really got me, though, was Raquel's corner. After the first round, basically, were getting stuck into it, saying, it's not the game plan to wrestle with her on the cage. It's not the game plan to clinch, keep distance. And every opportunity she got, she just ignored that and just closed the distance. I turned out.
And when she did it, when she followed their advice and she kept the distance and she'd land strikes, she was landing combinations. I mean, she was having great success. It was you're right, in between the first and the second round, I believe, is when they first gave her that advice. And she immediately went out and started landing a few combinations and got some good success. And then virtually straight away went to a clinch. And yeah, it was odd. It was odd. It was against what she was being told, and it didn't seem to be bringing her the greatest success. Obviously, for some reason, she just felt more comfortable in that position, I guess.
Yeah, it is interesting, and you have to be pretty frustrated if you're the corner and you're giving your fighter some advice and they're just completely not not listening to you. Or paid them for it this time, but in a different scenario it might not.
Yeah, I think in the end she was lucky because the grappling that she did clearly tired Bueno Silva out, and towards the end of that fight, she was not putting up that much resistance.
Yeah, I mean, Silva had multiple choke attempts. Admittedly, they were all in the chin primarily, but I mean, you could probably make the case that while she had the choke attempts, she probably by that stage didn't quite have the strength the grip strength to pull it off. But yeah, I mean, the striking numbers were pretty well weighted towards Pennington. 134 significant strikes to 69 for Silva. And Silva outstruck her just in the first round, 18-11, and all other rounds were heavily in Pennington's favour. Not even close on the scorecards. Two judges had it 49-46, and one judge had it 49-45.
I gave it.
Must have had a 10-8. Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, we're looking.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I saw a 10-8 round in that fight.
Yeah, I'd like to know which round it was. It could have been round 4 or 5, but
yeah,
not an overly entertaining fight. I must say.
yeah, no,
the end of the competition for a title fight also seemed to be lacking. I really worry about the women's, women's fighting. And Amanda Nunes was, clearly an elite fighter. and starching everyone. Shevchenko's also. It just looks like there's not the depth in the women's divisions.
Yeah, no, I agree. The talent pool is a lot shallower. It's more reminiscent of sort of early men's UFC or sorry MMA. Um, but it's under development. We'll see how that continues to grow. I thought, well, I mean, I think the next step for Pennington is has got to be Juliana Pena. You'd have to think.
Yeah, yeah, and Juliana's a tough fight. Striking's a bit robotic, but tough as nails. And that's the thing about it. Like a lot of the women, you can't say they're not tough. I mean, there's a lot of the women are as tough, if not tougher than some of the men for sure. I mean, we'll get into some of the other fights as well, but you certainly can't deny how tough Pennington and Silver certainly are. But yeah, unfortunately, cardio played a factor.
It did, yes.
And at this level, you kind of hope that it's not the case. But yeah, certainly after round two, it was a different fight.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And to gas out that early, I mean, she didn't even look strong across 3 rounds, So I think there's some work to be done for Bueno Silva in that regard.
Yeah, like what was she doing at the end of the second round, screaming on a stool? Like, as the commentators pointed out quite correctly, sort of wasting a bit of unnecessary energy there. And she was so fixated on the intro as well. And Bruce Buffer was, uh, you know, bringing her name out. It seemed like she wasn't focused on the right things.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe she needs to think about conserving her energy going into the fight.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Anyway, on to the next fight on the card. So this was for me personally a disappointment because it ruined my multi. But Neil Magny and Mike Malott. That fight was going Mike's way quite clearly
yeah,
until about a minute to go. And then he's like someone turned the off switch off. And he failed. It's, yeah. You don't see someone,
I think. Sorry, yeah, keep going.
you just don't normally see someone fade that quickly, that hard. I think any other time I can remember it's a fight, I think, where Hernandez fought a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, and similar thing. Um, he was getting towed up by the Brazilian, and then Brazilian guy got tired, and the fight just completely turned, and I think Hernandez sucked this guy out. But yeah, this was yeah, this was talk about. Oh, I was counting my money, and then suddenly it turns, and you see the fight.
Yeah, I mean, it was much the same as what you described. Mallow looked like he was well in control of that fight right up until about the last minute. Um, I think that this is what makes I described Magny in the pre-fight as a gatekeeper. It was interesting during the telecast. They said that's actually a badge he wears with honor. So, um, but this is what makes him a good gatekeeper in that regard, right? I mean, he showed Mallow or Malott that you can't be good for two and 3/4 rounds. You got to be good for the whole three. So I think there's lessons there for the young Malott. And Magny, he just it's a useful win for him that sees him stay in that gatekeeper role and not slide into irrelevance.
Yeah, well, I think leading into the fight, I sort of said this was going to be, this is going to be a fight in which Magny was going to play the auditor, and Malott was going to need his receipts in order. And I think when it got down to the end of the end there, I mean, it's quite staggering the numbers. If you take a look at the overall strike numbers, Magny ended up with landing more significant strikes, 57 to Mike Malott's 45. But of those 57 significant strikes that Neil Magny landed, 46 of them were in the last round.
Yeah, and I'd say 46 of them were probably in the last minute of the last round. It was certainly weighted to that particular part of the fight for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So
But it wasn't a bad stoppage. He genuinely had him down, he had him pinned, and he was landing shot after shot to his head. And Mallet looked like in the end he gave up.
Yeah,
Sort of just
oh for sure, and that's interesting you say that because on his X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, you put a post on in the morning before the fight saying, Canada I will not, disappoint you or something to that effect. And of course, a few people after the fight jumped on to remind him of what happened, but I just, again, it's pretty easy to do from my basement, but um, gee whiz, it's losing a 3 round fight on cardio that you're dominating. Yeah, he's
yeah, no,
he's got to make sure he takes that to the gym with him, right?
yeah, absolutely, and I think he will. I think he'll have to go away from this and really, this one's going to hurt him because he had it in the bag. So yeah, I'm sure he'll go back to the drawing board, and we'll see what happens next fight, whether he's worked on it.
Very good. And then we make our way on to the next fight. Chris Curtis and Barry Alt. Prince.
How are you? Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you make of that one?
Um, Look, it wasn't
What
a,
do you think about it?
it wasn't a. Oh, look, honestly, I thought the decision could have gone either way. I thought every single one of those rounds, um, none of them were sort of really clear cut in either direction. And when they're that close, judges are going to see what the judges are going to see. So I think 2 out of the 3 judges gave it to Curtis 3 rounds to 0, and one judge gave it to Marc-Andre Barrieu at 2 rounds to 1. Um, and like I said, I think all 3 rounds were that close. That the first 2 were largely uneventful. They exchanged a couple of strikes, but that was about it. And then round 3, the volume ticked up, but it was still a very close fight. They were still both landing on each other. There were brief periods where one would sort of seem to land a few more, but ultimately, I got to the end of that fight and thought it's a coin toss.
Yeah, I mean the numbers. Chris Curtis outstruck Barry Alt in all 3 rounds. Not a lot. 23-18 round 1, 51-45 round 2, and 66-59 round 3. Which is a little bit of a surprise. I thought Barry Holtz was quite aggressive in the last round. Probably could have been that way a bit earlier on, or maybe that might have changed the result. But Chris Curtis was pretty disciplined. Fought the fight at the pace he felt most comfortable at, and got the decision. Not I don't think he's gonna make the win, right?
I think the other thing to probably note there too is that the only one in that fight who was wearing the damage was Marc-Andre Barrieu. There was not too many marks on Chris Curtis, but Barrieu had a pretty decent cut and was bleeding at one point, I believe. So, that may well be what tipped it in Chris Curtis's favour.
For sure. But yeah, 2 of the 3 judges had it 30-27, and that's I probably, to be honest, I might have had it 29-28 to Curtis. I thought maybe the last round he might not have quite got it. I thought damage, but he was probably landing clean strikes in the last round very deep, but wouldn't have changed the result. All right, and then we come to the last fight on the main card: Arnold Allen versus the Russian Ivalov. How'd you see that one? For pretty much last.
Yeah, that one went the way that I thought it would. I gave Alan the first round, and then gave Ivalev the second round, and the third round I've actually got a note to rewatch it because there's a bit of controversy in that third round with those knees to a downed opponent, and I thought it was interesting. A few things that were interesting about it. One was, obviously, Ivalev had a sustained a pretty significant cut from that set of knees. I don't know then how the judges do look at that. Do they score it or do they not score it because it was deemed to be illegal? If it was illegal, why was there no point deduction? Why was there only a warning given? It seemed to be that there was some pretty, they were hard strikes. They weren't glancing blows. on the replay, I thought that the first two knees were legitimate because the movement, Allen was able to get him to basically lift his hand off the mat as he connected with the first two knees. But there was one final knee right before the ref stopped it, which was landed, and it looked like it was hard to tell, but it looked like from what I could see that hand he had a hand planted. So perhaps that last knee was the only illegal one out of the three. Um, but yeah, I mean, a lot, I guess, hinges on how you see that third round because I had it one each going in.
Yeah, right. Look, I didn't give Arnold either the first two rounds. But the third round, yeah, I gave it to Allen. Although, um, I agree with you. I think knees were legal. Um, yeah, and it was quite
Legal.
yeah legal. I didn't think they were legal. And if you think, they stopped the fight, so he lost the position. And if he did have an advantage there, he lost it because when they restarted, he had time to rest the other guy and get back his faculties if he'd been compromised. And then, as you said, at the point, he just was given a hard warning. So, that could have been. that could
But if they were, I was going to say, if they were legal, that's really cost Allen potentially the fight, right? I mean, he had him
he had the momentum, right? He had the momentum at that point. And
he also had him in a very compromised position with a big cut on his head. I mean, he could have really done some more damage there. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Was it your view that all of the knees were legal? All of it?
certainly the first couple. Maybe the last one. I have to rewatch it. I haven't seen it since, but yeah, it certainly. It's funny because he did those first two knees as he was taking his momentum back to the fence, and then he did a knee that was to his body, and then he went back to the head.
Mm-hmm.
And when he went back to the head, I think that last one might have been illegal, but I need to rewatch it. But I thought the ref was quick to jump in on that. I mean, clearly he's in the ring, we're not, right? But it'd be disappointing, but turns out they were legal knees. And I think in that situation, the spirit is that the guy's on off. He's got 2 feet on the ground, no knees on the ground. I thought we were beyond playing footsies with with your hands on the mat as a strategy to not get hit in the head. Like, I think you got to give the benefit of the doubt to the aggressor in that situation if it's close. Yeah, and it was close, and I think it should just let it go.
Yeah, like I said, I thought the first two were fine. It was the last one because it looked like he had really sort of planted some weight on his hand. And I mean, I don't know what the rules are, like whether it has to be weight bearing. There's some technical definition around that because you're right. It shouldn't be about playing the game where you sort of. I think when they talked about playing the game initially, though, it was people who were touching the mat and then lifting their hand off and then touching the mat and then lifting their hand off, not because they were being moved by the other fighter, but they were doing it to try to get the guy to kick them or knee them in the head, and then have it be illegal. And so that's a little bit different to a guy trying to get a hand down so that he is a grounded fighter.
At the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, he didn't have his weights. His hands weren't bearing weights for him to be grounded in that manner. Right, his feet were planted.
Well, his hand, it wasn't weight bearing at the moment that the first two knees connected because Allen lifted him when he went for the knee. So they seem to be legal, but the last one, like I said, you said you're going to need to rewatch it. But to me, when I watched it, it looked like the last one. He had his hand planted, and it was he was weight bearing on it, and Allen wasn't actually able to lift him for that one when he kneed him in the head.
Unlike those other couple of fights we previously discussed, cardio wasn't a factor in this one. Both guys had great cardio, fought at a high pace. It was a real high. It was probably one of the highest quality fights. It was certainly probably the highest quality fight on the main card. Both guys well conditioned. Arnold had really good movement. Bouncing around, was elusive, difficult to take down. But as I sort of speculated before the fight, that the threat of the takedown probably helped make Evolov's striking look will give him some opportunities. Um, you know, against Allen, sort of hit him a few times.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And sorry, yeah, keep going.
No, that's it.
No, I would agree with that. I saw it the same way. I was impressed actually as well by Allen's takedown defense because, as much as Eve Loev managed to get him down on occasion, Allen didn't make it easy for him, and it wasn't as easy for him as I thought it was going to be. And he tended to get back up. I mean, in the first round, he had I believe the official figures for Ivloev after the first round was one takedown out of 9, one successful takedown out of 9. Now, if you watch the broadcast, obviously there was actually 2 or 3 takedowns, but because Allen was straight back to his feet, they didn't actually count as successful takedowns.
Yeah, they reported having 5 takedowns for the fight out of 17 attempts.
Yeah, and I think after the first round it was 1 from 9. So he didn't have that much success. He was able to get him down, but Allen was very quick to get back to his feet. So I was impressed by that from Allen. Allen, man, he had some nasty boxing, nasty body shots. Particularly in that first round.
Well, as you said before the fight, it'd be a bit of a setback for Allen if he lost this because it'd be 2 losses in a row. It's going to set him back. Low for the Russian. It keeps his win streak, keeps him undefeated, and probably puts him in a position where he's going to fight, a highly ranked opponent. Maybe someone like Emmett next.
Yeah, yeah, that would make sense. He's certainly. I mean, after the fight, he was calling for a title shot, but that might be a little bit of wishful thinking.
Yeah, maybe they might want to build him up a bit more.
I think he really needs to get a really marquee name on his record as having beaten. Arnold Allen's certainly getting up there in terms of having that name on his resume, but outside of that, he doesn't have the power, the star power on his resume. He needs to be fighting someone who's a big name in the division.
Yeah, well, you don't have Frank Holloway. Holloway's a nightmare goalkeeper because he really does keep that gate close. The contenders come through.
Yeah, I mean, I bet Evloev would probably love that matchup though. I mean, that's he probably wouldn't be too upset with that matchup with his wrestling. He probably think he'd try to get hold of Max and hold him down.
Max is pretty hard to get hold of, and he's pretty good with managing his range. Anyway, he's booked for UFC 300 to fight Gaethje, so
yeah, right.
That's out of the cards. Just before we wrap up, what do you make of the commentary? I must admit, I'm getting a bit frustrated with Dominic Cruz as a commentator. It's not an easy job, but man, he says some stupid shit.
Yeah. What were the highlights for you?
Again, there's a guy, you think the guy had never watched MMA in his life, especially when he starts talking about, a cut that happens in round 1 somehow impacting scoring in future rounds. It was good to see John Anik call him out on that, but he does it all the time.
So what was it that he said and what was it that Anik said?
Oh, a cut. In one of the fights, there was a cut that took place. It might have been the main event actually. Dricus got his eye closed up in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sort of mentioned throughout the next couple of rounds that damage is, he's caused more damage and therefore he's winning the fight. Whereas, the fight's scored round by round. It's not scored by total damage across the fight. It's caused by damage accumulated in each round.
Yeah, so I don't know if I was listening to that same section of the commentary, but one part that I caught was they were describing exactly as you said, which is that there's a cut, if there's a cut caused in round 1, then in round 1, the fighter causing the cut gets scored that to his advantage in round 1. However, that cut continues to bleed through round 2, 3, and 4. They don't continue to score that for the fighter who did the damage in round 1. However, if the fighter then goes on to cause a second cut or makes the cut worse or continues to add damage, then that obviously it counts for that round, whatever round that occurred in, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. But yeah, that's not. Anyway, don't I look at it's a hard job, and like I said earlier, it's easy from my basement to be critical. But yeah, I just think sometimes you just say some silly things. But anyway,
He's no worse than Bisbing.
Bisping's all right. I like Bisping. I got a soft spot for Bisping. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the main card. Look, overall, how would you rank the card? 10.
I thought it was a good card. I enjoyed it. It wasn't, it wasn't a very deep card in terms of it, that had the star power very much weighted at the main event. But it was a good day of fights, I thought.
All right. Likewise, I'll give
What were
it.
your thoughts?
I'll give it a 6. That's it.
6? Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right, bro. I'll catch you in the next one.
All right, mate. Cheers.
All right.
Catch you, bro.